The sugi this week. The topic is Hanaka, which is the mitzvah of when an Eved, a specific unique mitzvah that an Eved works for you for 6 years and he leaves. You have to give him additional compensation. You have to give him specific amount of money. You can't let him leave alone. And I want to go through a couple of very interesting points on this particular mitzvah, and maybe just go through a couple of psukim here to see there's some very problematic ways of how you read the psukim, which will, because of these problems, we'll see some of the issues that come up. The pasuk says, "Ki yimarcha lecha achicha ivri avira ve'avdecha shei shanim v'shana shvish tishalchenu chavshim imach." So if someone works for you for 6 years and you send them out, lo v'chi tishalchenu, when you send them out chavshim imach, lo tishalchenu rekam, do not send them out empty-handed. Hanei tanik lo. You have to give him something extra. According to what the bracha that Hashem has given you, you must give him. So the first question we're going to have to deal with: what exactly does this mean according to the bracha that Hashem gave you? What exactly does that mean? And then it goes on. The Zacharti ki eved ha'yisrael be'eretz Mitzrayim yivtecha Hashem elkecha al kein anotim yitzavcha sedavar zeh hayom. Because remember that you were slaves yourself in Mitzrayim, and therefore I have commanded you to do this mitzvah today. So it seems to be from here that the reason of Hanukkah is a specific, unique mitzvah because we were avodim, and it only therefore would apply to avodim. It would not apply in any other case. Then goes off on a little bit of a tangent. If the slave says, "I don't want to leave," I want to stay here. So you give him a martzeh and he stays forever. Then the last pasuk is, "Lo yiksha be'einecha," should not be hard in your eyes. When you send him away free from you, ki mishne sachir avdecha shei shanim, which is very hard to understand what this means. Literally, it means because he worked double. Mishnah means double. Schar, the time of a worker. Avdecha, he worked for you, shei shanim. And then it says again, then it repeats again, and Hashem will bless you. So number one, why is it that it's repeating this thing about the bracha twice? First, it said earlier that Hashem, you have to give Hashem b'rachacha. The second thing is, why over here all of a sudden throwing it because he worked double the time for you. What does it have to do in anything with a schar sachir of a worker? So there's some practical differences here. Number one is, does this mitzvah only applies to, it would seem that it should only apply to an Eved, a unique situation in Eved, because you were a slave and you came in with nothing. We should remember that we came in with nothing to Mitzrayim and we left. Hashem showered us with all kinds of gifts. He gave us the visa of Mitzrayim. So therefore we have to do the same thing, the same thing to an Eved. But therefore it shouldn't apply in any other situation. However, the Sefer HaChinuch, when he explains it, when he goes to this mitzvah, he explains what you have to give and so forth, and he says, "But no heges mitzvah zu b'schar nekevus b'ana bais." It says this mitzvah applies both to men and women in the times of Beis Hamikdash. Ein din eved ivri no el b'zman sheyovel noeg. Because obviously the dinim of eved do not apply today. But he says, "Mikol makom af zman hazeh." Nevertheless, even in our day, yishma chacham v'yosef lekach. A person should take to his heart and understand. If someone hires a Jew to work for him, the Avduzman Merubah, and he worked for him a long time, or even if he just worked a little bit for him, he has to give him a tip. He has to give him extra money, surplus money, when he leaves. So this is a very hard chinuch to understand. The Minchas Chinuch goes to, where's the source of this? That this mitzvah applies not only to an Eved, but applies to a worker. So we're going to deal a little bit about how we see that. But number one, we see that the mitzvah, according to the chinuch at least, applies not only to an Eved, but applies in other situations. Where does he come up with this situation? Then also we have a Tosfos that says that if a person, that we can learn from this law that it's the same way that the Gemara discusses later on, if a person becomes sick and an Eved becomes sick in the middle of his tenure, his 6-year tenure, as long as he worked 3 years out of the 6 years, you have to pay him for the whole 6 years, even though he was unable to work for the remaining 3 years. And there's a machlokus in Tosfos whether this thing would apply if you hire a teacher. You hire a teacher to work for you. The teacher, and I guess in those days they obviously didn't have schools, so they would hire Malamed, and he became sick in the middle. He was not able to complete his whole tenure. You hired him for 5 or 6 years. Would you have to pay him for the remainder if he became sick? So the first opinion Tosha says that you can see from this Gemara that if someone becomes sick, that you have to pay him anyway. So too, if you hire someone as a teacher and he doesn't complete his work, you would have to pay him the whole 6 years, even if he didn't complete it. And the Tosha later on says, I don't understand this. Makes no sense, because that's only because an Eved is not a worker. An Eved is someone that you own him. For those 6 years you own him, and therefore you own him. You get the good with the bad. If he's healthy, fine. If he's not, it's you're stuck with him. But a worker, you hired him to do a specific job, and if he can't do the job, why should you be on the hook to have to pay him for the remainder of the time? Therefore, Tosha disagrees and says this would not apply in a case like that. A couple other points I have to bring out. So it's number one: is this what does it compare? Is this unique to an Eved? Number two, what exactly we're reading in this bracha over here? What exactly does this bracha mean? So, a practical application would be, number one: can you force someone to get to if he doesn't want to do it? The Eved leaves, and this guy does not want to give him his extra payment. Can you force him to do so? So if it's in most mitzvahs essays, it's a mitzvahs essay over here. It says you have to give him that. Any mitzvah essay, we are allowed to force a person. A person doesn't want to do the mitzvah, you force him. If it's a mitzvah essay, you go in. If he doesn't want to put a lulav in, you make him do it. If he doesn't want to eat matzah and pesach, you force him to do so. Therefore, this should be the same type of mitzvah, and therefore, Beis Din would have a right to go to obligate him to pay, even though he doesn't want to. Or this might be unique because there is a concept that a mitzvah that has matan schar b'tzida, if it mentions what the schar is by the mitzvah, then we do not force a person to do it. So, for example, kibud avayim, the Gemara says in Chulin that there's a certain person that did not want to give honor to his parents, and the Beis Din wanted to force him to do it. They wanted to force him to do it, and they came and said, no, you can't force him to do it because it's a mitzvah that says that if you do kibud avayim, the reward is you'll get arichas yamim, you'll get a long life. And therefore, since the Torah specifically says what the reward is, if you have no right to force him to do it. If he doesn't want that reward, you don't have a right to force him to do so. So over here also, it says, in the pasuk, it says, that you'll get blessed whatever you do if you do this mitzvah. So does that same concept apply over here? The concept should be that you should not be able to force him to give it because it falls under that category. So there's a very big dispute about this, whether it falls in this category. Now, why yes and why no? Because if we look at this, it says the first pasuk says, as I said over here, it says, okay, Asher beirachacha Hashem elokecha titin lo. According to what your bracha you should give to him. Is that telling us that that is reward that Hashem will give you the bracha if you do this, and therefore this would come into that category that it's a matan sar b'tzida that the schar is mentioned, or is that just telling you what you have to give? The Gemara discusses that from this pasuk we learn that you can't just give money. You have to give something that can be reproductive. You have to give animals. You have to give things that have a bracha to them, not just cash. Cash will not suffice to give to this. So if you say that if you say the pasuk is only telling what you have to give, and that's not the bracha, then we cannot learn from here that is a mitzvah shemat schar b'tzida, and therefore you cannot force a person. However, the problem is, what about why later on does the pasuk say at the end? It repeats itself. It says ubeirachacha, as we read the first time. He says ki mishnas sachar schir avdecha sheishanim ubeirachacha Hashem elokecha b'chol asher taseh, and Hashem will bless you whatever you have done. So it seems to repeat itself again. So is that the bracha, and is that a reward that Hashem will bless you? And that's why it repeats it. And therefore, again, if that's the case, you could not force him. But there are those who say that that's not really what it's telling you. What it's telling us is not that there's the reward is not for giving the Hanukkah, because that you're obligated to give. You're obligated. There's no special bracha for that. So it's a mitzvah's essay. It's exeris hakos. You have to do so. So what is the bracha? The bracha is specifically when it says lo yiksha be'einecha. It should not be hard for you to do it. It means that the bracha is that in addition to the fact you have to give the money, you have to give it full-heartedly. You can't